Part 1. The sky above Earth was dark, filled with smoke and ash that blocked out the sun. The air smelled of burning metal and despair. Cities lay in ruins, their once bright lights now extinguished forever. The attack had come without warning, sudden, overwhelming assault by an alien species known as the Krylos. They were fast, brutal, and seemingly unstoppable. Humanity had never faced anything like them before. In Washington, D.C., President Daniel Carter stood silently at the window of his office, staring out at the chaos below. Emergency vehicles screamed through the streets, sirens wailing endlessly. Refugees packed into makeshift camps, clutching what little they had left. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the windowsill. He felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on him, and it was crushing. "Sir," a voice called softly from behind him. It was Laura Bennett, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Her face was pale, but determined. She carried a folder in her hand, its contents heavy with implications. "We need to address the nation and the world. People are scared. They're looking for answers." Daniel turned away from the window and nodded slowly. "I know," he said, his voice low and weary. "But what do I tell them? That everything we've built, everything we've fought for, is gone. That we might not survive this." Laura stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "You tell them the truth, that we'll rebuild. That we won't let fear destroy us." And she hesitated, glancing at the folder in her hands. "There's something else you should know." He raised an eyebrow, motioning for her to continue. Laura opened the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This just came in from the Krylos," she said quietly. "They've offered to negotiate, a chance for peace." For a moment, Daniel didn't respond. His mind raced with questions. Why would the Krylos suddenly want peace after such devastation? Was this some kind of trick? But deep down, he knew they couldn't afford to ignore the offer. If there was even the smallest hope of ending this nightmare, they had to take it. Meanwhile, miles away in what used to be New York City, Colonel Ryan Hayes surveyed the wreckage around him. The streets were littered with debris-crumbled buildings, abandoned cars, and the remnants of lives shattered beyond repair. His uniform was torn and stained, but he barely noticed. All he could think about was the look in his daughter's eyes when the first bombs fell. She hadn't made it out in time. Ryan clenched his fists, trying to push the memory aside. Now wasn't the time to grieve. There was work to be done. As he walked among the ruins, soldiers under his command scrambled to organize relief efforts. Supplies were scarce, and morale was lower than ever. Despite the grim circumstances, Ryan refused to give up. He'd seen worse battles in his career, and he wasn't about to let the Krylos win not while he still drew breath. Nearby, Captain Sarah Mitchell directed a group of volunteers loading supplies onto trucks. Her blonde hair was tied back in a tight ponytail, and her sharp blue eyes missed nothing. Though exhausted, she moved with purpose, barking orders and offering encouragement whenever someone faltered. Like Ryan, she had lost people close to her during the attack. Her brother, a pilot in the Air Force, had been shot down over Chicago. But unlike Ryan, Sarah believed there was still a way to save humanity if only they could find it. As night began to fall, Sarah climbed onto the roof of a partially collapsed building to get a better view of the area. From up high, the scale of the destruction became even more apparent. Entire neighborhoods had been wiped off the map. Fires still burned in the distance, casting an eerie orange glow across the horizon. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the enormity of it, all the loss, the pain, the anger. Then she took a deep breath and forced herself to focus. Down below, a young boy no older than 10 approached one of the supply trucks. His clothes were dirty, and his face streaked with tears. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said timidly to a soldier, handing out food. "Do you have any water? My mom, she's sick." The soldier hesitated, then nodded, and handed him a bottle. The boy clutched it tightly and ran back toward a nearby tent where a woman lay coughing weakly. Sarah watched the scene unfold, her heart aching. How many more children would suffer because of this war? How many more families would be torn apart? In Washington, President Carter prepared to speak to the United Nations. The room was packed with delegates from every corner of the globe, all waiting anxiously to hear what he would say. Cameras flashed as he stepped up to the podium, adjusting the microphone. For a brief second, he closed his eyes, gathering his thoughts. Then he began to speak. "My fellow leaders, my fellow humans," he started, his voice steady, despite the turmoil inside him. "Today, we stand united in grief. Our world has been attacked, our cities destroyed, our people killed. But we cannot let this tragedy define us. We must rise above it. We must show the universe that humanity is stronger than fear." He paused, letting his words sink in. The room was silent except for the faint hum of cameras recording the historic moment. "To that end," he continued, "we have received an unexpected proposal, a chance to negotiate with the Kralos. Some may see this as a betrayal of those we've lost. Others may see it as our only path forward. Whatever your views, I ask you to consider this carefully. The decision we make today will shape the future of our species." As Carter concluded his speech, the room erupted into murmurs. Some delegates nodded in agreement, while others shook their heads in disbelief. Among them sat Ryan Hayes, who had been summoned to represent the military perspective. He listened intently, his jaw tightening with each word. When the president mentioned the possibility of peace talks, Ryan couldn't stay silent any longer. "With all due respect, Mr. President," he interjected, standing abruptly. "How can we trust these creatures after what they've done? They slaughtered innocent civilians. They showed us no mercy. Why should we give them a second chance?" His words echoed through the chamber, sparking heated debates among the delegates. Some supported Ryan's stance, arguing that peace would only embolden the enemy. Others sided with Laura Bennett, who urged caution and diplomacy. The meeting dragged on late into the night, with no clear resolution in sight. Far away, aboard the starship Odyssey, Captain Alex Monroe monitored communications between Earth and the Krylos fleet. His ship hovered near the edge of human-controlled space, ready to respond to any threat. Alex had always prided himself on being a man of action, but lately, he found himself questioning whether fighting was the right answer. The images of destruction, broadcast from Earth, haunted him. Could there really be another way? As the hours passed, the tension grew thicker. On one side of the galaxy, humanity wrestled with its desire for vengeance. On the other, the Krylos debated the merits of extending an olive branch. Neither side fully trusted the other, yet both recognized the cost of continued conflict. In the end, the choice was simple: continue down the path of war, or take a leap of faith toward peace. And so, as dawn broke over a battered Earth, preparations began for the most important meeting in human history. The fate of two species hung precariously in the balance, teetering between hope and hatred, forgiveness and fury. Part 2. The news of the Krylos offer for peace talks spread like wildfire across Earth. It was the kind of story that demanded attention, hopeful, yet unsettling, promising, yet suspicious. People gathered around radios and televisions, eager to hear every detail. Some saw it as a lifeline, a chance to stop the bleeding and rebuild what had been lost. Others viewed it as a cruel trick, a ploy by the Krylos to buy time or weaken humanity's resolve. In New York City, now a shadow of its former self, Laura Bennett stood in front of a crowd of survivors. Her voice carried over the makeshift microphone set up on the back of a truck. "We have an opportunity," she said, her tone calm but firm. "An opportunity to end this war before it destroys us completely. To sit down with the Krylos and find a way forward together." Her words were met with mixed reactions. A few people clapped, their faces lighting up with cautious optimism, but others shouted in protest, their anger boiling over. One man stepped forward, his face red with rage. Together, after what they did to us, he yelled. They killed my wife. My kids are gone because of them. How can you even think about shaking hands with those monsters? Laura didn't flinch. She'd expected this reaction. I understand your pain, she said, her voice steady. Believe me, I do. But if we let our anger guide us, we risk losing everything. This isn't just about revenge, it's about survival. About making sure no one else has to lose their family. The man glared at her, but said nothing more, retreating into the crowd. Laura sighed inwardly. She knew winning people over wouldn't be easy. The wounds were too fresh, the scars too deep. Still, she pressed on, traveling from city to city, speaking to anyone who would listen. She believed in the power of diplomacy, in the idea that talking could solve problems weapons never could. But convincing others to share her vision was proving to be a monumental task. On the other side of the debate stood Colonel Ryan Hayes. He hadn't slept in days, driven by a relentless fury that burned hotter with each passing hour. In his mind, there was only one solution: retaliation. Justice. Payback. Anything less would be an insult to the millions who had died. Ryan's platform gained traction quickly, especially among those who had suffered the most. He spoke at rallies, his voice booming with conviction. They attacked us without warning, he told a packed auditorium in Chicago. They showed us no mercy. Why should we show them any? Peace is a fantasy, a dangerous one. The only language these creatures understand is force. And if we don't use it, they'll come back. They'll finish what they started. His words resonated deeply with many. People cheered, pumping their fists in the air. Some even chanted his name, turning him into a symbol of resistance. Media outlets labeled him the voice of vengeance, and soon his face was everywhere on TV screens, in newspapers, plastered across social media. Supporters flooded into recruitment centers, eager to join the fight. Ryan fed off their energy, using it to fuel his own determination. But not everyone agreed with him. Sarah Mitchell watched one of his speeches from a tent in what used to be Boston. She sat cross-legged on the ground, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Next to her, Lieutenant Emma Lewis shook her head in frustration. He's going to get people killed, Emma muttered. Doesn't he realize that starting another war is exactly what the Krylos want? If we strike first, we're no better than they are. Sarah nodded slowly. He's playing on fear, she said, and anger. Both are powerful motivators, but they cloud judgment. We need clear heads right now, not hot tempers. Emma looked at her skeptically. You really think peace is possible? After everything they've done? I don't know, Sarah admitted, but I do know that rushing into another battle won't fix anything. We've already lost so much. What happens if we lose again? There won't be anything left to save. While Sarah and Emma debated the merits of peace versus war, President Daniel Carter faced mounting pressure from both sides. His advisors crowded around him in the Oval Office, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of conflicting opinions. Some urged him to accept the Krylos offer immediately, arguing that diplomacy was the only way to prevent further bloodshed. Others warned against trusting the aliens, insisting that negotiations would leave Earth vulnerable to attack. Carter listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When the room finally fell silent, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. I hear you all, he said. But here's the thing, we can't afford to make the wrong choice. If we go to war again, we might not survive. And if we trust the Krylos blindly, we could walk straight into a trap. Either way, the stakes are too high. One of his aides cleared her throat nervously. So, what do we do? Carter hesitated, then stood up and walked to the window. Outside, soldiers patrolled the grounds, their rifles slung over their shoulders. Beyond them, The Washington Monument loomed against the gray sky, a reminder of the nation's resilience or, perhaps its fragility. "We prepare for both," he said finally. "We send a delegation to meet with the Krylos, but we also strengthen our defenses. That way, no matter what happens, we're ready." The decision did little to quell the growing unrest. Across the globe, protests erupted, with crowds taking to the streets to voice their opinions. In London, thousands marched through Trafalgar Square, holding signs that read "No peace without justice." In Tokyo, demonstrators clashed with police outside government buildings, chanting slogans in favor of negotiation. Even within the United Nations, tensions ran high as delegates argued over the best course of action. Senator Greg Parker, a fiery politician from Texas, seized the moment to rally opposition to the peace talks. Known for his brash demeanor and populist rhetoric, Parker had long been a vocal critic of Carter's administration. Now, he saw an opportunity to gain influence by positioning himself as the champion of those seeking revenge. "We can't roll over and play dead," Parker declared during a televised interview. "Nothing makes me angrier than seeing spineless leaders groveling to our enemies. The Krylos attacked us, they killed our children, destroyed our homes, and humiliated us on the world stage. If we bow to them now, we're admitting defeat. Is that what we want? To live as cowards?" His words struck a nerve, galvanizing supporters and further polarizing the nation. Social media platforms buzzed with heated arguments, hashtags trending overnight as people picked sides. Hashtag Reject Peace became a rallying cry for those who shared Parker's views, while hashtag Choose Hope united those advocating for diplomacy. Memes, videos, and opinion pieces flooded the internet, amplifying the divide. Amid the chaos, Captain Alex Monroe, aboard the Odyssey, monitored communications between Earth and the Krylos fleet. He couldn't help but feel uneasy about the situation. The Krylos' sudden willingness to negotiate seemed out of character, almost too convenient, yet dismissing the offer outright felt reckless. Humanity was already on the brink of collapse. Another war might push it over the edge. "What do you think, sir?" asked Jake Roberts, the ship's tech specialist. He adjusted his glasses nervously, glancing at the data scrolling across the monitor. "Do you believe they're sincere?" Alex frowned. "I don't know, Jake. Something about this doesn't sit right with me, but we can't ignore it either. If there's even a small chance of avoiding more bloodshed, we owe it to everyone to try." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "Still, we should stay sharp, just in case." "Agreed," Alex replied. "Keep an eye on their movements. If they make one wrong move, we need to be ready." Back on Earth, Sarah Mitchell received orders to report to Washington, D.C. for a briefing on the upcoming peace summit. As she packed her belongings, she couldn't shake the feeling that the mission was doomed from the start. Too many variables, too much distrust. Yet she reminded herself why she had joined the military in the first place: to protect others, to give people a fighting chance. Maybe, just maybe, this was it. As she boarded a transport plane bound for the capital, Sarah glanced out the window at the devastated landscape below. Fire still burned in the distance, sending plumes of smoke spiraling into the sky. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges and uncertainties, but as long as there was breath in her body, she vowed to keep moving forward, for her brother, for her country, for humanity itself. And somewhere, light years away, Chancellor Zorak of the Krylos faced similar doubts, seated in his chambers. He reviewed intelligence reports detailing the human response to his proposal. While some factions welcomed the idea of peace, others rejected it outright, calling for continued aggression. The divide mirrored the turmoil within his own ranks, where General Vrax pushed for renewed attacks despite Zorak's orders. Zorak sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. The weight of leadership bore down on him, heavier than ever. He had gambled everything on the hope that humans might see reason, that they might choose cooperation over conflict. But as he stared at the holographic map of Earth, glowing faintly in the dim light, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see which path humanity and the Krylos would take. Part 3. On the Krylos homeworld, a planet cloaked in perpetual twilight. Chancellor Zorak stood before his council. The room was vast, its walls lined with glowing crystals that pulsed faintly with light, casting eerie shadows across the faces of those seated around the circular table. Each member of the council represented a different faction of Krylos society: military, science, trade, and diplomacy. But today, their unity felt fragile at best. Zorak's voice echoed through the chamber as he addressed them. "We have extended an offer to humanity," he began, his tone measured but firm. "It is not just an act of goodwill. It is necessary for our survival. If we continue down this path of war, we risk losing everything. Our resources are stretched thin, and the human resistance grows stronger every day." General Vrax leaned forward, his sharp eyes narrowing. He was a towering figure, his armor adorned with medals earned in countless battles. His presence commanded respect, but it also inspired fear. "You speak of survival," he growled, his deep voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "But how can we trust these creatures? They are unpredictable, emotional, weak. They will see our gesture as a sign of weakness, nothing more." The room erupted into murmurs of agreement and dissent. Some nodded along with Vrax, their expressions grim. Others exchanged uneasy glances, clearly torn between loyalty to tradition and the need for change. Zorak raised a hand, silencing the chatter. "I do not claim this will be easy," he said, "but I ask you to consider the alternative. Do we wish to spend another century locked in endless conflict, draining our people and our planet? Or do we take this chance to forge a new future?" A scientist named Lyra spoke up, her voice soft but steady. "Chancellor, I understand your concerns, but General Vrax has a point. Humans are unlike any species we've encountered before. Their emotions drive them to extremes, both good and bad. We must tread carefully if we hope to succeed." Zorak nodded, acknowledging her words. "That is why I have tasked Ambassador Trellis with leading our delegation. She is skilled in negotiation and understands the importance of patience, but we must also prepare for the worst. If humans reject our offer or attempt to deceive us, we cannot hesitate to defend ourselves." Vrax slammed his fist on the table, causing several members to flinch. "Defense is not enough," he barked. "If they show even a hint of aggression, we strike first. Let them remember who holds the power here." The tension in the room thickened, each side digging in their heels. Zorak knew he had to act quickly to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control. Turning to Trellis, a slender Krylos with shimmering silver skin and piercing green eyes, he gave her a pointed look. "Prepare your team," he instructed. "Leave no detail overlooked, and keep me informed of any developments." Trellis bowed slightly, her movements graceful yet deliberate. "As you command, Chancellor," she replied. With that, she exited the chamber, her mind already racing with plans. Meanwhile, aboard one of the Krylos' largest warships, General Vrax paced back and forth, his thoughts dark and restless. He despised the idea of negotiating with humans, viewing it as a betrayal of everything the Krylos stood for. To him, strength was the only language worth speaking, and weakness invited destruction. As far as he was concerned, Zorak's decision to pursue peace was a fatal mistake, one that could cost them dearly. "Sir," a young officer interrupted, snapping Vrax out of his brooding. "We've detected unusual activity near the border zone. Human vessels appear to be mobilizing." Vrax's lips curled into a sneer. "So, they're preparing for battle while pretending to negotiate. How predictable." He turned to face the officer, his gaze cold and calculating. "Keep monitoring their movements, and ready my fleet. If they so much as twitch in our direction, we respond with force." The officer saluted and hurried away, leaving Vrax alone with his thoughts. For now, he would follow Zorak's orders, but only because it served his larger purpose. If the humans proved unwilling to cooperate, he would seize the opportunity to crush them once and for all. The Chancellor might dream of peace, but Vrax knew better. War was inevitable and he intended to win. Back on Earth, Sarah Mitchell arrived in Washington, D.C., stepping off the transport plane into a city still reeling from the devastation. The air smelled faintly of smoke, and the streets were filled with soldiers and civilians alike, all moving with a sense of urgency. She adjusted the strap of her duffel bag and made her way toward the designated briefing location, her mind racing with questions. Inside the secure building, she found herself surrounded by familiar faces: President Daniel Carter, Laura Bennett, Colonel Ryan Hayes, and a handful of other key figures. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of the upcoming summit hanging over everyone like a storm cloud. Carter opened the meeting, his expression grave. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "What we discuss here today could determine the fate of humanity. The Krylos have agreed to meet us at a neutral space station orbiting Saturn. Our goal is simple: establish open lines of communication and explore the possibility of peace." Ryan Hayes crossed his arms, his skepticism evident. "And what happens when they stab us in the back?" he demanded. "Because that's exactly what they'll do. They've already shown us their true colors." Laura stepped in, her voice calm but firm. "Colonel, I understand your concerns, but refusing to engage won't solve anything. We owe it to the survivors to at least try." Hayes glared at her, but didn't argue further. Instead, he turned his attention to Sarah. "Captain Mitchell, you've been assigned to lead security during the summit. What's your assessment?" Sarah straightened, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "We'll be operating in uncharted territory," she said. "The Krylos may claim they want peace, but we can't assume they're sincere. My team will remain vigilant, ready to respond to any threat." Hayes nodded grudgingly, though his distrust was clear. "Good, because if things go south, we won't have time for second chances." As the discussion continued, details of the mission came into focus. Captain Alex Monroe and his crew aboard. The Odyssey would escort the delegation to the space station, ensuring safe passage. Meanwhile, Sarah and her team would handle ground operations, coordinating with both human and Krylos forces to maintain order. When the meeting adjourned, Sarah lingered behind, catching Laura's arm as she prepared to leave. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "do you really think this is going to work?" Laura sighed, her usual composure wavering slightly. "Honestly, I don't know, but I believe it's worth trying. Sometimes, taking a risk is the only way to find a solution." Sarah nodded, though her doubts remained. She appreciated Laura's optimism, but experience had taught her that hope alone wasn't enough. Still, she couldn't deny the importance of the mission. Whether it succeeded or failed, history would judge them based on the choices they made now. Days later, preparations were underway for the journey to Saturn. At a military base outside Chicago, soldiers loaded supplies onto the Odyssey, double-checking every piece of equipment. Sarah supervised the process, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Nearby, Lieutenant Emma Lewis reviewed tactical plans with Jake Roberts, the tech specialist, who was busy calibrating surveillance drones. "You think they'll let us bring weapons?" "Inside this station?" Emma asked, glancing at the arsenal being packed. Jake shrugged. "Probably not, but better safe than sorry, right?" Emma smirked. "Guess we'll find out soon enough." As the hours ticked by, anticipation grew among the crew. For some, it was excitement. For others, dread. Captain Alex Monroe stood on the bridge of the Odyssey, staring out at the stars through the viewport. He had spent years training for moments like this, yet nothing could fully prepare him for what lay ahead. The stakes were higher than ever, and failure was not an option. Finally, the day of departure arrived. The delegation boarded the Odyssey, greeted by Alex and his crew. President Carter delivered a brief speech, urging everyone to stay focused and united. "This isn't just about us," he said. "It's about the future of our species. Whatever happens, remember that we're here to represent humanity, not just its anger, but its hope." With those words echoing in their ears, the ship launched into space, leaving Earth behind. Through the windows, the blue-green orb of their home planet grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. Ahead of them loomed the unknown, neutral space station, where two vastly different species would come face to face for the first time in history. On board, Sarah found a quiet corner to gather her thoughts. She stared at a photo of her brother tucked inside her uniform pocket, tracing its edges with her thumb. "This one's for you," she whispered softly. Then she slipped the picture back into place, squared her shoulders, and headed toward the briefing room. Whatever awaited them on the other side, she was ready. Part 4. The Odyssey docked smoothly at the neutral space station, orbiting Saturn, its sleek hull gleaming under the faint light of the distant sun. The station itself was an impressive structure, massive ring-shaped platform with glowing panels that pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. It had been designed as a meeting ground for interstellar diplomacy, though until now, it had rarely been used. Inside, corridors stretched endlessly, lined with smooth metallic walls and illuminated by soft ambient lighting. The air smelled sterile, devoid of any familiar scent, as the delegation disembarked. They were greeted by Ambassador Trellis and her team of Krylos representatives. The aliens stood tall and imposing, their skin shimmering in shades of silver and blue. Their eyes glowed faintly, giving them an otherworldly appearance. Despite their calm demeanor, there was an undeniable tension in the air. Both sides eyed each other warily, unsure of what to expect. President Daniel Carter stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. "Ambassador Trellis," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet us here." Trellis inclined her head slightly, her movements fluid and deliberate. She didn't take his hand. Krylos customs didn't include physical contact, but her voice carried a tone of respect. "Chancellor Zorak sends his regards. We are hopeful that this summit will yield positive results." Carter nodded, though the word hopeful felt hollow given the circumstances. Behind him, Laura Bennett offered a small smile, trying to project warmth despite the awkwardness of the moment. Colonel Ryan Hayes, however, remained stoic, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His gaze never left the Krylos, scrutinizing every movement, as if expecting betrayal. The group moved into the main conference room, a circular chamber with a large table at its center. Holographic displays hovered above the surface, ready to present data or visuals as needed. Human delegates took their seats on one side of the table, while the Krylos occupied the opposite end. Sarah Mitchell and her security team positioned themselves strategically around the room, keeping watch for any signs of trouble. Laura opened the discussion, her voice steady but warm. "We appreciate your willingness to negotiate," she began. "After everything that has happened, it's clear that both our species need a way forward, a path toward peace, rather than continued conflict." Trellis regarded her thoughtfully before responding. "The Krylos understand the cost of war. Our own people have suffered losses, though perhaps not in the same way as yours. Chancellor Zorak believes cooperation is possible if both sides are willing to set aside past grievances." Ryan Hayes leaned forward abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Past grievances," he repeated, his voice sharp. "You attacked us without warning. You destroyed entire cities, killed millions of innocent people. How can we just set that aside?" The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Trellis blinked slowly, her glowing eyes locking onto Hayes. "Not all Krylos supported the initial strike," she said carefully. "There are factions within our government who acted without authorization, Chancellor Zorak seeks to address these divisions and prevent further bloodshed. Hayes scoffed, shaking his head. Convenient excuse. Are we supposed to believe that your leader had no idea what was happening? That he didn't order the attack himself? Before Trellis could respond, Laura interjected, her tone firm but diplomatic. Colonel, let's focus on solutions, not accusations. If the Krylos are sincere about making amends, then we should hear them out. Hayes shot her a glare, but didn't argue further. Instead, he sat back in his chair, his jaw clenched tightly. The rest of the human delegation exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to proceed. Even President Carter seemed uncertain, his usual confidence wavering under the weight of the moment. Trellis seized the opportunity to continue. Our proposal is simple: a ceasefire followed by joint efforts to rebuild damaged regions. In exchange, we ask for assurances that humanity will not seek retribution or escalate hostilities. At this, Ryan couldn't stay silent. Rebuild. You want us to help you after what you've done? Why should we lift a finger to aid the very creatures who nearly wiped us out? His words sparked murmurs among the humans, some nodding in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably. On the Krylos side, several representatives stiffened visibly, their glowing eyes narrowing. For a moment, it seemed as though the fragile peace might shatter entirely. But then, unexpectedly, Sarah Mitchell spoke up. Her voice was calm, but commanding, cutting through the rising tension. Colonel Hayes raises valid concerns, she began, drawing everyone's attention. But anger won't solve anything. If we truly want to move forward, we need to focus on actions, not emotions. What guarantees can you offer us, Ambassador Trellis, that this isn't just a delay tactic? Trellis tilted her head, considering the question. We propose placing observers from both sides in key locations to ensure compliance. Additionally, we are prepared to share technology that could aid in reconstruction and act of goodwill, to demonstrate our sincerity. This revelation caught the humans off guard. Sharing advanced technology was a significant gesture, especially for a species known for its secrecy. Laura exchanged a glance with President Carter, who gave a barely perceptible nod. That's an interesting offer, Laura said cautiously. But trust must be earned. Actions speak louder than words. The conversation continued for hours, each side probing for weaknesses or hidden motives. Progress was slow, hindered by cultural differences and lingering mistrust. At times, tempers flared, and voices rose, only to be calmed by Laura's patient mediation. Through it all, Sarah kept a close eye on the Krylos, searching for any sign of deception. So far, nothing seemed out of place, but she knew appearances could be deceiving. As the session drew to a close, Trellis addressed the group once more. Today has been challenging, but productive. Let us reconvene tomorrow to discuss specific terms. Perhaps then, we can find common ground. President Carter stood, offering a polite nod. Agreed. Thank you for your time, Ambassador. With that, the meeting adjourned. As the humans filed out of the room, Hayes muttered under his breath, "Waste of time. They're stalling." Sarah overheard him and stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Maybe, but we still have to see this through. If there's even a chance of avoiding another war, we can't walk away." Hayes met her gaze, his expression hard. "And if it's a trap, what then?" "Then we'll handle it," Sarah replied firmly. "But until we know for sure, we play along." Back aboard the Odyssey, Captain Alex Monroe reviewed footage from the summit, analyzing every interaction between the humans and the Krylos. Jake Roberts sat beside him, tapping rapidly on a tablet. "Anything unusual?" Alex asked. Jake shook his head. "Not yet. Their body language seems consistent, with someone trying to negotiate honestly. But," he hesitated, scrolling through additional data. "Their ships near the border zone are moving. Not aggressively, but definitely positioning themselves." Alex frowned, leaning back in his chair. Keep monitoring, and alert me immediately if anything changes. Meanwhile, Laura Bennett paced her quarters, replaying the day's events in her mind. While she tried to remain optimistic, doubt gnawed at her. Were the Krylos truly sincere, or was this some elaborate scheme? She wished she could trust her instincts fully, but the stakes were too high to rely solely on intuition. In the Krylos camp, Ambassador Trellis reported back to Chancellor Zorak via secure transmission. The humans are cautious, she explained. Some are open to negotiation, while others remain hostile. Colonel Hayes in particular poses a challenge. Zorak listened intently, his expression unreadable. Continue as planned, he instructed, but inform General Vrax to maintain readiness. If negotiations fail, we must be prepared. Trellis bowed slightly. Understood, Chancellor. Far away, aboard General Vrax's warship, the commander smirked as he received the update. Predictable, he muttered to himself. Let them talk. When the time comes, they'll regret ever doubting us. Back at the space station, Nitor. What passed for night in the artificial environment settled over the delegates. Most retired to their quarters, exhausted from the day's events. Sarah stayed awake, walking the dimly lit corridors, her thoughts racing. She stopped at a viewport, gazing out at the swirling rings of Saturn. The sight was breathtaking, a reminder of how vast and mysterious the universe truly was. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine a future where humans and Krylos coexisted peacefully. It felt like a distant dream, fragile and fleeting. Yet, deep down, she clung to the hope that such a future was possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests of patience and resolve, but for now, she found solace in the quiet beauty of the cosmos, preparing herself for whatever lay ahead. Part 5. The next morning, the air aboard the neutral space station felt heavier than before. Tension lingered like a storm cloud waiting to burst. The humans gathered in the conference room, their faces etched with fatigue and determination. President Daniel Carter took his seat at the head of the table, flanked by Laura Bennett and Colonel Ryan Hayes. Across from them, Ambassador Trellis and her Krylos delegation sat poised, their glowing eyes scanning the room with quiet intensity. Before the session began, Sarah Mitchell approached Laura, holding a small data pad. Ambassador, she said softly, we intercepted some communications last night. I think you should see this. Laura's brow furrowed as she glanced at the screen. The messages were fragmented but telling internal Krylos transmissions, hinting at divisions within their ranks. One phrase stood out. Vrax moves without Zorak's approval. Laura's heart raced. Could it be true? Was General Vrax acting independently, undermining the peace talks? She handed the data pad back to Sarah, her voice low. Keep this between us for now. If we bring it up too soon, it might derail everything. Sarah nodded, understanding the delicate balance they were walking. She returned to her post near the door, her hand resting on the holster of her sidearm. Trust was in short supply, and she wasn't about to let her guard down when the meeting resumed. Laura opened with a question designed to probe deeper into the Krylos' intentions. Ambassador Trellis, can you explain how decisions are made? Within your government? Specifically, who authorized the attack on Earth? Trellis hesitated, her smooth features betraying the faintest flicker of unease. As I mentioned earlier, not all actions were sanctioned by Chancellor Zorak. There are factions that operate outside his control. Ryan Hayes leaned forward, his tone sharp. So you're saying your military doesn't answer to your leader? That sounds convenient. Trellis's eyes narrowed slightly, though her voice remained calm. It is not convenient, is reality. General Vrax has long opposed Chancellor Zorak's policies. His aggression toward humanity is well known. President Carter raised a hand, cutting off Hayes before he could respond. Let's focus on solutions, he said firmly. If there are rogue elements within your military, What steps are being taken to address them? Trellis tilted her head, considering the question. Chancellor Zorik is working to consolidate authority. However, such changes take time. In the meantime, we propose joint patrols along contested borders to prevent further incidents. That suggestion sparked immediate debate among the humans. Some saw it as a step toward cooperation, while others viewed it as a potential trap. Laura pressed on, trying to steer the conversation toward practical terms. Joint patrols could work, but only if both sides agreed to strict oversight. No hidden agendas. Trellis nodded slowly. Agreed. Transparency will be key. Despite the progress, Ryan Hayes remained unconvinced. As the session wore on, he grew increasingly restless, his frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. When the topic shifted to reparations for Earth's losses, he finally snapped. "You expect us to accept scraps while you sit there pretending to be innocent?" he demanded, slamming his fist on the table. "Your people destroyed our cities, killed our families, and now you want us to play nice. This isn't negotiation, it's insult." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Several Krylos representatives bristled visibly, their glowing eyes flashing with indignation. Trellis, however, maintained her composure, though her voice carried a sharper edge. "Colonel Hayes, your anger is understandable, but accusations will not lead to resolution. If you cannot engage constructively, perhaps this summit is a waste of time." Hayes opened his mouth to retort, but Laura intervened quickly. "Ambassador, please forgive Colonel Hayes's outburst. Emotions are running high on both sides. Let's take a short break to regroup." Reluctantly, the Krylos delegation agreed, and the humans filed out of the room. Once outside, Hayes rounded on Laura, his face flushed with rage. "You're letting them manipulate us. They attacked first. They owe us answers, not excuses." Laura met his glare head-on, her voice firm. "I understand your pain, Colonel, but losing control won't help anyone. We need to stay focused. If we walk away now, we lose any chance of ending this war." Hayes clenched his fists, but said nothing more. Instead, he stormed off down the corridor, leaving the others to regroup. Sarah watched him go, her expression troubled. "He's going to cause problems if we don't rein him in," she muttered. President Carter sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "We'll deal with him later. For now, let's focus on salvaging this meeting." During the break, Sarah reviewed the intercepted communications again, searching for anything that might strengthen their position. She noticed something she hadn't caught before, reference to unauthorized troop movements near the border zone. It wasn't conclusive proof, but it was enough to raise suspicions. She decided to share the information with Alex Monroe, aboard the Odyssey, hoping he could verify it. Meanwhile, aboard General Vrax's warship, the commander paced the bridge, his thoughts consumed by visions of victory. He despised the idea of negotiating with humans, viewing it as a betrayal of Krylos' pride. To him, peace was weaknesses, disease that needed to be eradicated. As far as he was concerned, Chancellor Zorik had already gone too far by agreeing to the summit. "Sir," an officer reported, snapping Vrax out of his brooding, "our scouts confirm increased activity near the border. Human vessels appear to be mobilizing." Vrax smirked, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "Good, let them come. When they show their true colors, we'll crush them once and for all." The officer hesitated, glancing nervously at the general. "And Chancellor Zorik, what if he discovers our movements?" Vrax's expression darkened. "Zorik is weak. He clings to ideals that will destroy us. If he interferes, he'll regret it." Back at the space station, the summit reconvened after the break. Laura attempted to steer the discussion back on track, focusing on concrete steps for "Both sides have grievances," she said diplomatically, "but dwelling on them won't solve anything. Let's agree on a ceasefire and establish clear rules for interaction moving forward." Trellis nodded approvingly. A reasonable proposal. We suggest creating a joint council to oversee compliance. Ryan Hayes scoffed under his breath, earning a warning glance from President Carter. Despite his skepticism, the outline of an agreement began to take shape. By the end of the session, tentative terms were drafted, though both sides remained cautious. Later that evening, Sarah received a message from Alex Monroe. His team had confirmed unusual activity near the border zone. Krelo's ships maneuvering aggressively, despite claims of peaceful intentions. Sarah knew they couldn't ignore this development, but bringing it up prematurely could sabotage the fragile progress they'd made. She found Laura in her quarters, poring over notes from the day's discussions. "Ambassador," Sarah said quietly, closing the door behind her, "we have a problem." Laura looked up, her expression wary. "What is it?" Sarah explained the findings, watching as Laura's face grew pale. "This changes things," Laura murmured. "If Rax is acting independently, we could be walking into a trap." "We need to decide how to handle it," Sarah replied. "Do we confront them directly, or keep gathering evidence?" Laura thought for a moment, then shook her head. "Not yet. If we accuse them without proof, it could shatter the talks. For now, let's monitor the situation closely and prepare for the worst." Sarah nodded, though her unease lingered. As she left Laura's quarters, she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The summit had brought them closer to peace, but also closer to disaster. That night, as the station drifted silently through the void, the humans and Krylos delegates prepared for another day of negotiations. Unbeknownst to them, forces beyond their control were converging, threatening to unravel everything they had worked so hard to build.